Hello, it's me! And this is Boy.
Mother.
And this time, we're going to discuss manly man.
Or masculinity.
We think it's fall apart. Let's take it from the top. What is a man? Alright, boy, hit it! What is a man? He is your dad. What is a man? He can grow facial hair. What is a man? A man wash his hands up the loo. That's what you do. What is a man? What is a man? A man loves his cat. What is a man? He likes to barbecue. What is a man?
He eats steaks medium rare.
He's gonna punch out the bear cause he's a man. Alright lads, what do men like to do? What's that? I can hear you! Everyone, get ready! What is a man? A man does his tax. What is a man? He puts the toilet seat down. What is a man? He does stupid crap just for fun because he's dumb and a man. What should we do? That's what we do. What is a man? That is a man. We are man.
Mother.
Yes, boy?
That doesn't tell us anything.
You have a point. What is a man? Is a man just an adult male? Is a man a father? Someone with powerful hands? This is a question that has haunted men across cultures and time. When Plato defined that a man is a featherless biped to the applause of his mates. Diogenes, the cheeky bugger and lunatic hobo dog man of Sinope, brought in a plucked chicken and said,
Behold, a man.
with broad nails. As succinct as Plato was, that still doesn't answer the question. What is a man? What defines a man? And by extension, what is manhood and masculinity? That's actually a tricky question because for one, it's something people just take for granted in their day-to-day lives. That's like if one day you start asking people, why does the sky have the same color as grass? To you, it's always been that way, so you just take it for granted and never put too much thought into it, which falls into the gender binaries, something we'll discuss another time. Second, despite the fact that we do have a biophysical definition, a man being an adult male, many societies and cultures around the world still do not accept that to be enough of a criterion. For someone to be considered a man, there are other requirements that can seem quite arbitrary. For example, in the 1940s and 1950s, John Wayne, who did not fight in World War II, was considered the epitome of masculinity because of his stone-cold machismo demeanor compared to this wee schmuck. Or Mr. Brandon Fraser, way later in the 1990s, who despite his perky presentation and his beautiful dreamy eyes,
So dreamy.
it's a symbol of a manly man, and that's just in America. There are some examples of masculine symbols, but exactly what is a man? How do we quantify manliness? How do we empirically measure manhood? In 1990, David D. Gilmore, apparently an anthropologist from State University of New York, tried to do so, publishing Manhood in the Making, to try to answer these fantastic questions. Manhood in the Making was a cross-cultural analysis of how masculinity is expressed and perceived around the world, and what he found was, a whole bunch of nothing sauce. Far from being exceptionally weird or different, what people understand as being a real man has been very consistent across time and culture around the world. What makes a man is not tied to physical maturity or to some extent physical ability alone. What a man is, or rather the worth of a man, is based on three imperatives: his ability to provide, to procreate, and to protect. More importantly, he basically argues that these things are not something people are born with, it's something to be earned. And how does a young lad earn this privilege to be a man? Simple! He has to suffer!
What?
Okay, we'll explain what's up. So, to oversimplify,
Manhood!
in the making, found that the social construct and notions of
Manhood!
are rather common and consistent amongst many societies in that
Manhood!
is earned by ritual, rites of passage and not mere birthright. As an aside, what is a rite of passage? A rite of passage or coming of age ceremony is, well, a ceremony or a ritual where a person leaves one group and joins another, reflecting a change in status. It's things like a man is made when he finishes a degree, he gets a job, he finds a spouse, he buys a house, and so on. Markers to prove that they are no longer children but an adult, or in the context of our topic, a man. There are of course other rituals from around the world. There's the Ni Vanuatu people of Vanuatu, a small island nation in the South Pacific. Every year, boys are made into men during the annual harvest ritual called goal or land diving. During the harvest season, villagers will build towers of up to 30 meters high, which then male volunteers would scale it. After securing vines to the ankles, the volunteers would take a leap of faith. The goal of the jump is to land close enough to the ground without bashing the skulls in, and the higher a man climbs, the manlier he is. On the other side of the world, the Satari Moor tribe of the Amazon have a different idea on what makes a man. To become a man, prospective lads must stick his hands in a glove woven with Paraponera clavata and endure their stings for at least 10 minutes without making a noise. Oh, you're not a myrmecologist? Right. Paraponera clavata is known by a few names: the big black ant, the 24-hour ant, or sometimes, the bullet ant. So yeah, the lad has to wear a glove full of angry bullet ants, and if his arms get paralyzed, don't worry, it's supposed to do that. Oh, and he has to do this 20 or so times. Okay, what do these three rituals have in common? Not the ants, nor the risk-taking, but the suffering and ultimately the inherent insecurity.
Manhood!
As Gilmore argues, needs dramatic proof for it to be considered valid, as it is a reflection to the three imperatives of masculinity: the ability to provide, to procreate, and to protect. In a more idealistic light, the suffering a lad has to endure is to teach him an important lesson, to hone the fundamental trait as detailed in the book: the willingness to face and perhaps overcome adversity. Because what is life but a struggle and competition? Now, as
Manhood!
is an exclusive status, what happens to someone who, for one reason or another, does not meet or even rejects it? Well, here's where we get the term
Toxic masculinity.
coined in the 1980s by Mr. Shepard Bliss, farmer, poet, pastor, and psychologist. Toxic masculinity was originally a reference to Mr. Bliss's authoritarian military father's not so very nice behavior, and the term now, in academic context, refers to masculine traits, the things that define a man, taken to the logical and detrimental extremes. These are things such as taking the suffering necessary to make a real man as the ideal, reinforced by myths such as the superiority of Sparta. In popular culture, Sparta, or rather
Spartans!
are synonymous with badass, and this stems from ancient Sparta's infamous practices such as the agoge, a badass training regime with things like kids beating each other up, or fighting wolves to weed out the weak and forge boys into real Spartan men. Except that's not really what the agoge is. It's more of a state indoctrination program, and Sparta never really had the best military record, not even in Greece. So all this suffering was for nothing. And by the time the Spartans really embraced these manly things, Sparta was just a funny tourist trap for Romans and other Greek cities to gawk and have a good time. This, by the way, is the same logic as boarding schools or Viking England, where the cruelty is the point. Gotta beat out the weakness to make fully functional adults. Yeah, of course, this isn't a very good idea. Yes, some adversity is good, necessary even, but to treat any usual weakness as a fault of character is where toxic masculinity starts becoming a problem. Take the classic mantra of real men don't cry. Humans are creatures of emotions, while some don't emote as much.
I know now why you cry. But it's something I can never do.
That doesn't mean humans don't feel. Crying is a natural response to strong emotions.
That's right. Cry.
And to repress this need, no. To punish it is again what toxic masculinity is, as again the inherent insecurity of masculinity.
Not man enough!
The constant need to prove a man's worth is not inherently bad, but toxic masculinity takes this to a detrimental level, not just to the man himself, but to the people around him. The need to prove wealth, resources, can be shallow.
Look at that subtle off-white coloring. The tasteful thickness of it. Oh my god. It even has a watermark.
The need to procreate reduces people as mere biological tools.
You're still fertile, you need to marry again and breed.
I am Queen Regent, not some brood mare.
You're my daughter!
To prove power isn't always logical.
Oh, no. A man washes his hands before or after tending to his needs. It tells you a lot about a man. He does it both times. Points to a weakness in character.
Which, before we misunderstand, there is a reason for the additional adjective in toxic masculinity. Masculinity in itself isn't toxic. They, like so many things, have a purpose for their existence. Rather biologically deterministic, but Gilmore discusses this in his book, explaining that many norms and practices of masculinity is that evolutionarily, life is hard. Physically, men are on average stronger, and keynote on average. I have no delusions of taking down Miss Joannets or Miss Shields in a fight if they decide to stop playing around. Oof, the head movement.
Beautiful.
Inversely, positive masculinity is less of a novel concept, but it is a reminder of why some traits and archetypes of masculinity are so celebrated. For example, the strong, silent bloke, the calm, wise mentor, the gentle giant, amongst many others. These archetypes are celebrated because they represent decisive, nurture, and protective traits associated with masculinity. Also, most importantly, they are not jerks. Because masculinity and gender, though for our video, because masculinity is so tied with the human experience, you really don't need to look too hard to find any examples of masculinity in pretty much anything. Which, on that note, now we are finally on masculinity in Things Fall Apart.
Written in English.
Here's a link if you haven't seen the summary and other stuff. Alrighty then, let's Things Fall Apart
Written in English.
takes place in pre-colonial Nigeria, a land of order, tradition, and of free men. Our story follows a manly man and the Chad of Umuofia, Chad Kwanko, if you will, who made his name after beating Amalines the cat in a legendary wrestling match. He also fought in many great battles, drank palm wine from the skulls of his enemies, had 3 wives, 8 children, built an obi with a banana tree, and grew the manliest of plants, yams, which Okonko had to work very hard for, and for this, Okonko was pleased. Going by Gilmore's definitions of what makes a man, Okonko, in theory, has reached the pinnacle of manhood, and Things Fall Apart agrees with this. Okonko is a great warrior and protector of unparalleled prowess. Okonko is also an excellent provider, and his people are never hungry, not least. But Okonko is also a great procreator with 8 children. He also has a banana tree. So here's the important question. Why is Okonko not pleased? Before we get into that, let's take a step back and set the scene. Things Fall Apart is many things. One of them is that it is an examination of masculinity in Igbo culture. Remember, Achebe wrote the novel as a refutation of colonial tropes about his people as either mindless or even noble savages. Instead, he seeks to portray the people of pre-colonial Nigeria as a complex panoply, a people like any other that cannot be so easily categorized as these guys are funny people who wear masks and these people wear hats and so on. Regarding masculinity and manhood, Achebe has no interest to glorify nor demonize, to neither exaggerate nor diminish. Merely, he wishes to document and explore them. According to Things Fall Apart, pre-colonial Nigeria is a highly patriarchal society where almost all aspects of life for a man are defined by his masculinity. Heck, even roots like yams and cassavas are gendered. And before we judge...
Diego? Deve ser o shampoo que você tá usando.
Thus, a true man is someone who protects, who provides, who procreates, and anyone less than that is an akbala, a refuse of society to be shunned and ridiculed. Of course, exactly what is a man and how a man is measured is complicated. In fact, the thesis of this video, Things Fall Apart, as with almost every piece of media, explores this theme with its characters, which there's a lot, so for our sake, we're narrowing it down to a few blokes. Unoka! Unoka! It's Okonko's dad and one of the first characters introduced in the story. Although Unoka is dead before the story even begins, his influence is from everywhere in Things Fall Apart, as he is a foil, a clear contrast with Okonko. See, unlike Okonko, Unoka was the absolute opposite of a manly man. Unoka was a soft, yamless weakling and only had 1 child. Okonko, he preferred playing his flute than playing farmer or soldier, but the narrative doesn't exactly condemn Unoka for his lack of manliness. No, what the narrative condemns him for is that he was barely a father to Okonko. Unoka wasn't a very large man, and he had a fear of blood, which meant that he couldn't be the manly warrior that Umuofia worshipped. However, he was also weak of will, and so he couldn't be the protector the young Okonko needed. More so was that Unoka is fundamentally a lazy man, and when Okonko and Umuofia starved, Unoka preferred to play his flute. By the end of his life, Unoka had racked up mountains of debt, which after his passing, all fell upon Okonko. This is why Okonko had a massive chip on his shoulder, though we'll get into that later. Ngoye and Ikemefuna are also foes of each other. Ngoye, Okonko's true-born son, is weak and unmanly, while Ikemefuna, his adopted hostage son, is a strapping, manly lad. Despite their differences, the brothers loved and compensated each other. Ngoye, also a flutist like his grandfather, would soothe Ikemefuna's heart with his music and stories, while Ikemefuna was an achievable role model for Ngoye to strive and improve himself, and he did, overcoming most of his insecurities before Ikemefuna's death. The brothers still had their prejudices. This is pre-colonial Nigeria after all, but the brothers were there to show that it doesn't have to be hard all the time. Thank you, boy. Obirika is Okonko's bro and manly mirror of him. Like Okonko, Obirika is a respected warrior, a decent farmer, and a family man who embodies the proud traditions of Umofia. What sets him apart, however, is that unlike Okonko, Obirika is not afraid to look weak, or rather, he did not have the same obsession with masculinity. Throughout the story, Obirika was always there for his bro, serving as the voice of reason for Okonko, always questioning him and always challenging the traditions, and of all the people to do this, it had to be Obirika. Unlike the elders who Okonko saw as his superior, and everyone else who was his lesser, Obirika was Okonko's manly equal. Thematically, Obirika is the compromise between Igbo notions of masculinity and the inevitable shadow of colonialism. While Obirika did embody and held onto the old ways, he was both pragmatic and empathetic enough to bend when he needed to, while at the very least, carry some scraps of Umofia's soul into the future. And of course, there's Okonko himself. Okonko is the Uberman of things fall apart, the pinnacle of masculinity, and everything about him is manly. His demeanor is manly, his job is manly, his smile is manly, his thighs are manly. Okonko is a man's man. That was exactly the problem. Okonko was a protector, a provider, a procreator, but haunted by the legacy of failures of his father. Okonko is a fundamentally insecure man, and as he climbed the highest tree of manhood in Mafia, the plunge down is abyssal. Okonko's manliness in Things Fall Apart is both a celebration and a tragedy. With stubborn determination alone, Okonko built a life for himself out of practically nothing, slaving away during the famines until one day he made a home where his family never had to feel hunger. However, because Okonko grew up in hard times, he had no choice but to be hard. To him, showing anything other than strength was a sign of weakness because he had no choice. He had to be strong or die like everyone else. While he had everything, this shadow made sure that Okonko was never truly pleased. The problem was that he didn't know how to be anything else, and like a Greek tragedy, this flaw finally broke him when he met an unstoppable force that made him snap like a twig. Okonko's toxicity hurt not just the people around him, but also himself. He fell victim to his insecurities. He let them guide him, control him, until it was too late. That no matter how many times he had the chance to just turn around and walk away, that little voice in his head will always command him to take another step, closer to the edge. In contrast, Okonko is at his happiest when he let his guard down and just let himself be. When Azima was ill, Okonko, who chose softness, allowed him to connect with Akwefi, his second and favorite wife, bonding over the shared fear of being Azima's parents. When Okonko was sinking in self-hatred after his execution of Ikemefuna, he let himself be open when his bro, or Bireka, came to visit him, thus pulling him out of his torpor. When Okonko allowed himself to feel fatherly pride and joy at his sons, both Ikemefuna and Ngoye, they thrived, becoming the man he always wanted them to be. Okonko always had the chance to be happy, to be satisfied and be pleased, to be with his loved ones. But again, that toxic flaw that poisons everything it touches didn't even let him have that. Because to feel that kind of happiness is to be weak. It is unmanly. So, we are back here again with the question that we started with. What is a man? If we're going with the most straightforward answer, a man is an adult male. But things are never that easy, are they? Because if it was, then why have we always been arguing what is a real man?
Kill the multi-bear or never be a man.
And I guess I'll never be a man. It just wasn't right, so I said no.
You were your own man and you stood up for yourself. You did what was right even though no one agreed with you. Sounds pretty manly to me, but...
A man chooses. Slay, obey. No monster alive turns the other cheek. No monster does that. A thinking man does that.
Gilmore's In the Making try exploring this, looking at how people around the world understand and experience and masculinity. His answer is that despite the differences of time, cultures and geography, and masculinity, it's quite uniform if we want to simplify it. A man is defined by his ability to provide, to procreate, and to protect. But if a woman can do all those things, then is she a man? Inversely, if a bloke doesn't do one or any of these things, then he isn't a man? Then there's also that bit about the inherent insecurity of manhood. The whole masochism bit about a boy needing to suffer to be a real man. Now, let's not take it the wrong way. Insecurity isn't inherently a bad thing. Insecurities can be useful because they teach us to be careful, to motivate us to be the better version of ourselves than before. You don't spend hundreds of hours training, working until your bones crack and your body is covered in bruises just to fistfight a toddler. Unless you believe that there's a chance that you can lose. While manhood and masculinity isn't the central theme of Things Fall Apart, it is still a fundamental pillar that influences many things in the story. All of the male characters, to some extent, can be viewed through the lens of the three imperatives: their ability to provide, to procreate, and to protect. And even if the audience doesn't share the same cultural background as Achebe or the characters, these concepts and struggles are still quite understandable, almost like a universal language. More so because to this day, we are still entangled with the question of what is a man? Food for thought.
Mother, how would you like your steak?
Medium rare! Thanks everyone. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share. Good steak. Well done, boy.
It's a teacup.